Today is finally the day, the SERVPRO First Responder Bowl. 3:15 kickoff this afternoon. We'll have final bowl prep for you on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode is brought to you by Sonos. Sonos is the official sponsor of ESPN College Football. Go to Sonos.com to learn more. As always, I want to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube. 5 days a week, your team every day. I hope everyone had a good holiday weekend. I apologize for the unexpected delay. There hasn't been an episode yesterday and last Friday. I came down with a non-COVID related illness, but finally that is in the rear view mirror. So we are back. Today is the day. 3:15 kickoff in the SERVPRO First Responder Bowl between the Air Force Falcons and the Louisville Cardinals. We'll talk final bowl prep for you here on the show, beginning with the keys to the game for the Cardinals. One for the offense, one for the defense. And as we did last Thursday, identifying the offensive players to watch in this matchup for both teams, we're going to switch to the defensive side of things, identifying two players to watch for both the Falcons and the Cardinals on the defensive side of the ball. And then finally, we will talk final thoughts and predictions on the matchup. Before we get into the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, where I serve as both a football beat writer and a recruiting analyst. Also do some PA announcer work for the university in various sports. You can check out my personal Twitter in the handle in the graphic at the bottom left hand of your screen. And you can follow the podcast Twitter page at LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into the show. Keys to the game for the Cardinals against the Air Force Falcons. There are two, and we kind of touched on these, in the very first bowl prep episode. For the offense, it is about establishing the run. Air Force is a very good rushing defense. We'll talk about the significance of that on offense here in just a second. Defense, it is getting the Falcons in third and long situations. And obviously, I'll give you some rationale here in just a second. But going back to the offense, the Louisville offense, especially running the football over the season, has gotten progressively better. There was a stretch in the middle part of the ACC slate to where the Cardinals, I think it was 5 games to where they rushed for over 200 yards as a team in 5 straight consecutive games. At the end of the season, that necessarily wasn't the case. In that loss against Kentucky and in some other contests as well. But for, a whole sample size of the season, whole season's body of work, the Cardinals rushed the ball really well, and it wasn't really necessarily all one player. Jalen Mitchell, Hassan Hall, Travion Cooley, Malik Cunningham. It was a by-committee approach. Malik Cunningham, probably the most dangerous runner, but Jalen Mitchell leading the way in that Cardinal backfield. And then there's been a kind of a revolving door of players coming in and really showing out. Maurice Berkeley being one of those as well. Jawar Jordan got some late reps against his former team later in the season. But the reason why this is extremely important to get the running game going against the Air Force Falcons, number one, as we've been talking all season, getting the rushing attack going, especially early, allows the passing attack to be able to flourish, especially with a offense that is down, 2 of its top 5 receivers in Jordan Watkins and Justin Marshall. It's not the fact that I'm scared that they can't replicate their production, because I believe they can. It's in fact exactly the opposite of how I feel, because I have a ton of trust in Marshawn Ford. I've got a ton of trust in Amari Huggins, Bruce, Tyler Harrell, and some of the younger players, Josh Johnson, etc. So it's not necessarily indicative of my distrust of the current receiving group. I just think that, with a defense, now this is the kicker here. Air Force's rushing defense is 7th in the country in yards per game allowed to their opponents on the ground, 94.7. They're just ahead of Clemson, who had 98.8. It would be better than any opponent that the Cardinals have played thus far. Yes, You do have to take into consideration that strength of schedule. They're in the bottom 100 of strength of schedule in the country. That has to be, brought up over and over because it has the ability to skew some of the results and taint them and make them seem like they're better than they really are. Although, overall through the season, Air Force has a top 20 defense across the board for their schedule in the Mountain West Conference. So 9-3, the Air Force Falcons are, and it's really just a matter of being very sound on both sides of the ball. Offensively, getting the rushing attack going would, number one, really kind of maybe throw the Air Force defense into a frenzy, because if you're able to get the rushing attack going against a very good rushing defense, then not only are you setting the tone up front in the offensive line, and that's indicating that the offensive line is carving out holes, but also you're allowing your passing game to get going. And Malik Cunningham is very dangerous when that rushing attack is flourishing. So that's the number one thing to get the offense going. Defensively, a little bit taller of a task. The Falcons offense, number one in the country, just around 340 yards on the ground per game for Air Force. And that has been, the big enigma for the Louisville defense coming into this matchup is how do they stop them? And it's all about containment. It's about getting them in third and long situations. When I watch the film on the Air Force Falcons and I watch games on, against Boise State, against Army, against Navy, what I've seen is when they get into third and long situations, quarterback Hazik Daniels struggles, completes less than 46% of his passes on the year. He has less than 1,000 yards passing, and obviously that shouldn't necessarily come as a surprise, considering the fact that the Falcons possess the number one rushing attack in FBS Division I college football. So it's just a matter of getting them in third and long situations. Easier said than done. It brings through it brings through a certain level of discipline for your defense. We'll talk about that here. The two key defensive players for the Cardinals. You have to be disciplined. I have some worries about the deception of the offense and how well they execute that deception that Air Force does. So it's just a matter of getting them in third and long situations, because we've seen, especially look back at that game against Kentucky, when you establish the run against Louisville, it opens up a lot of things, a lot of possibilities, but obviously Air Force doesn't have the passing attack that the Wildcats do. But when you're able to get the ground game going and getting chunk yards, 6-7 yards at a time, and just moving down the field, the Cardinals have struggled against the run pretty much all year long. Well, let me put it into context. They don't necessarily struggle with shutting down a team's number one option, but as a collective unit, they've shown bits and pieces throughout the season to where they'll give up chunk yardage, big plays. That has to be able to be limited to a minimum in this contest against the Falcons, because one thing that they have is they have about four guys on that team that run the ball extremely well: the quarterback, the running back, the wide receiver, the fullback. There are so many different options, especially when you run that triple option offense. It's going to make things difficult for the Cardinal defense to ensure that they find success this afternoon. It's about getting them into situations to where Hazik Daniels has to throw the football. I'm talking 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11, 3rd and 8. Something to where, at the very least, you make them hesitate and not think, okay, well, we're going to run regardless on 3rd and short. You have to put them in situations to where you're making the opposing offense uncomfortable. And the way teams have made the Air Force offense uncomfortable throughout this season has been forcing Hazik Daniels to throw the football. So it's all about getting some pressure on him and making sure you get through that Air Force backfield. So at the end of the day, their work is cut out for them on both sides of the ball, but it should be a very interesting matchup. I want to now focus on the key defensive players in this matchup between the Falcons and the Cardinals. We talked about the offensive players last Thursday, and unfortunately, like I mentioned, a sickness has prevented me from recording up until now, but it is the day of the game. Talk about those here in just a second after we talk about a couple words from our sponsors. As always, I want to say thank you for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure to check out the Ultimate College Football Playoff Preview, local experts, betting advice, and draft analysis. The most comprehensive college football playoff preview has begun, and be sure to check it out ahead of this Friday's matchups on New Year's Eve. So, looking into the excuse me, identifying the key defensive players to watch for on both sides of the ball. For the Louisville Cardinals, it is the two standouts at linebacker, C.J. Avery and Yasir Abdullah. We'll talk about why those players are the ones to watch for the Cardinals here in just a second, right after identifying the Air Force defenders to watch. It is linebacker Vince Sanford and defensive tackle Jordan Jackson. So let's focus on the Louisville side of things. It can be viewed as kind of cliche to focus on arguably the team's two best defenders, current best defenders on the field, in C.J. Avery and Yasir Abdullah. But I think that the rationale and the reasoning speaks for itself. Going up against the number one rushing attack in the country, you need all hands on deck. It's about staying disciplined against a triple option offense. And what better way to stay disciplined than being led by example by your two leaders in the linebacking core? C.J. Avery, arguably been one of the best players against the rush this season for the Cardinals, leads the team in tackles, 87. That's almost 10 more than the next player. Excuse me. He also has 3 sacks on the season, which is third on the team, tied for third on the team. Okay, sorry about that. I'm not necessarily sure exactly what happened there. But ultimately, like I was saying, C.J. Avery, leading by example, 6-year senior. Scott Satterfield called him the quarterback of the defense, makes his life that much easier calling defensive plays. Brian Brown would attest to that statement as well. And it's just a matter of staying disciplined. You need your veterans to be locked in this game, even more so than a regular matchup, especially in the linebacking core when it's about making reads on the opposing quarterback that's, having all this deception around him. C.J. Avery and Yasir Abdullah, especially Yasir. I feel like Yasir has, before the season, my breakout player for the Cardinals was Abdullah, and this year he's been absolutely incredible. 52 tackles on the season. I believe that is 5th or 6th, but he is tied for 25th with 9 sacks on the year. So it's a matter of, it's kind of a yin and yang. C.J. Avery, you get more of a balance in the rushing attack, defending the rush. And then Yasir Abdullah is great at getting after the quarterback with his speed, athleticism, and strength. So you're going to need that linebacking tandem to really rise to the forefront in this one, to be able to get through the line of scrimmage, blow plays up before they're able to get a bunch of chunk yardage, and just be able to make good decisions and good reads. Obviously, we keep talking about this term deception, right? Like it keeps getting overblown. Like I keep, pounding the hammer on deception. But at the end of the day, that's kind of what we have to focus on here, because the triple option offense, it's different than a matchup against a team like Syracuse. Syracuse came into Cardinal Stadium in November against a Louisville team that, handled them for the most part. Sean Tucker didn't do all that well. Garrett Schrader didn't do all that well. They made them obsolete in the rushing attack and forced them to throw the football. Didn't do necessarily all that well. You ask, well, what's different? It's the fact that how they run the football. It's the schematics. It's the system in which they do so. They execute at a very high level. You think of the dual threat and focusing on 2 guys. Now you think of not only, number one, great blockers on the outside and up front, but also multiple players that could be carrying the football in the triple option offense. You have one guy faking the read option one way, and he's got 2 other guys running the other way. So I'm interested to see how this team looks right away. Obviously, they struggled in 2018 against Georgia Tech, and the team I don't even think punted once. That is 3 years different, 3 years from that point. So you have to be able to accept that. But at the end of the day, it just goes to show you, for a team that executes very well their game plan, they are going to be a scary opponent. And I'll talk about why that scares me a little bit more in the next segment. But focusing now on the Air Force defensive players to watch. The first one is linebacker Vince Sanford, leads the team with 56 total tackles. Now, that is 31 less excuse me, than C.J. Avery. And what I can tell you is, from when looking at the box score, or I guess you could say total stat sheet cumulative stats, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players with at least 40 tackles on the season. So you're getting a very balanced attack. Vince Sanford leading that Air Force defense, 9.5 sacks on the season, 21st in the country. He's tied for 8th in the country with 4 forced fumbles, 6'1", 210-pound senior from Hamilton, Ohio. Been an overall solid, contributor this year after not necessarily doing a lot his first 2 years in 2018 and 2019. So, Sanford is going to be a player that, we mentioned why Air Force is, so tough to defend. Now you look at a Louisville team, it's a little bit different. Okay, you kind of get that, the Syracuse style. It's a dual threat quarterback that can really get up through the line of scrimmage if you don't contain him. Malik Cunningham, one of the most explosive dual threat quarterbacks, not only in the ACC, but in the country as well. It's going to be the work cut out for them for the Air Force Falcon defense. Vince Sanford going to be one player that the Falcons rely on to spy the quarterback and do solid work in the running game, or in defending the running game, I should say. So obviously, when you defend Malik Cunningham, some of it's on the defensive lineman. I feel like a lot of it's on the linebacking core. But number one, you have your quarterback spy. You have guys that are just watching after him and being such a focal point of this offense. That has to be assumed that's going to be incorporated into the game plan. You think about, Louisville offense, 2 words, Malik Cunningham, because all of 90% of the good things that happen in this Louisville offense come from Malik Cunningham. 10% of the running backs, don't get that misconstrued, because the 10% is a big percent. But Malik Cunningham, it's more so an indication of how important, how pivotal, how crucial he is to this offense. The Louisville offense goes as he goes. So, hold on, my camera's a little... So, I'm sorry, I'm having all these technical difficulties today, shaking off the rust. So, the other defensive player to watch for the Air Force Falcons is the leader on the team in sacks. That is defensive tackle Jordan Jackson, a little bit down there in the total tackles, 37 tackles on the year. I think that's like 7th on the team, but he is a big disruption in the middle. 6'5", 285-pound senior from Jacksonville, Florida. This is basically, his first year playing for the Falcons, and he has been extremely disruptive for that Falcon defense with his length, with his strength, and has very underrated footwork and a good use of hands in the interior of that Air Force Falcons defensive line. So when you talk about defending the rush, getting through and trying to get after the quarterback, Vince Sanford, Jordan Jackson combine for sorry, I can't talk today. I'm sorry. He's not the leader in sacks. I misspoke. I said that Jordan Jackson was the leader in sacks. That is incorrect. The number 2 on the team, Sanford, leads the team. But they combine for 16.5 sacks between the two of them. To get Louisville in some uncomfortable situations, you have to put them in second and long, third and long, to where you force Malik Cunningham to use his arm and find guys downfield. When you take away his ability to scramble and use his legs, you take away arguably the most dangerous component of his skill set, but he can definitely hurt you either way. But if you take away one option and force him to do one thing, it has been seen throughout this season and last season. When you put Malik Cunningham in third and long situations, and the Louisville offense in third and long situations, they struggle, as does every offense, Dalton. That should be no debate. But obviously, for the Air Force defense, Vince Sanford and Jordan Jackson going to be 2 that the Falcons rely on to get some containment on the Louisville rushing attack, and Malik Cunningham more specifically. So we're going to take a little bit of time now to focus on the final thoughts and predictions. Before we do that, let's talk about our friends at BetOnline, who has had you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowl season and toward the pro football playoffs. So it remains your number one spot for all the sports action. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit by using the promo code LOCKEDON. For all your favorite sports, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports, so don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers. BetOnline is where the game starts. Okay, Final thoughts, final predictions. It's weird thinking that today's game day. It's been basically almost a month since the last game of the regular season, but we're finally here. It snuck up on us, or kind of creeped slowly toward us, depending on your perspective and point of view. But final segment before the game, and we save it always for the final thoughts and prediction. And I'll be completely honest, I've gone back and forth all morning, all night the previous, about who I have to win this game. Last night it was Louisville. This morning I woke up thinking Air Force has the slight advantage, and it really just boils down to how can Louisville defend the nation's #1 rushing attack. Admittedly, when you look at what they've done this year against one-dimensional offenses, Syracuse basically just passed the ball. Virginia basically just passed the ball. Brennan Armstrong didn't run the ball all that well, but the Cardinal defense couldn't stop him passing wise. That might be a little bit apples to oranges because it's different strengths for the defense. Syracuse comes to town. The Cardinals do very good job. They make the rushing game obsolete. They force Garrett Schrader to throw the football. They're down 31-7 at halftime against the Cardinals on Lamar Jackson's retirement day, and the Cardinals end up winning that matchup big. However, when you focus on this Air Force offense, you have to throw out, basically what you've seen this season, because you're facing a completely different animal. And I don't want to overblow, the effect of a triple option offense, but I also don't want to undersell it. Like, there's a healthy medium, there's a fine line to cross, but it's the identity of this team, and there just hasn't been a lot of sample size as to Louisville facing that in the Scott Satterfield era. I don't think there's actually been one instance in the Scott Satterfield era in 3 years, and it should be. I mean, there's only 4 to 5 teams that run it, the military academy teams, and Georgia Tech used to. Georgia Tech now, with the new coach, has kind of switched playing styles. We saw that in the 2020 loss. They don't run the triple option offense anymore. It's something that's of the past, outside of Army, Navy, Air Force, etc. So you can kind of plan for it all you want, you can predict all you want, but at the end of the day, there's no telltale sign. So it's kind of like taking a shot in the dark. And from what we've seen from Louisville's rushing defense this year, when it's focusing on a primary ball handler, I think Louisville's defense is better equipped to succeed. But when you have multiple guys, you force more of the linebacking core in the secondary to stay disciplined. That's where you get a little bit of some where Louisville gives up some chunk yardage, some big plays, etc. So I'm gonna go Air Force here. But it's not a blowout in my opinion. I think I almost went pick 'em and just said, okay, neither team wins, tie. But I'm playing. But that just kind of shows how torn I am. Like, last night I went to sleep thinking Louisville. This morning I woke up feeling Air Force. By 3:15 whenever you're listening this, I might already be back to Louisville. So I'm not sold either way. I can see Louisville's offense succeeding against an Air Force defense that maybe not necessarily has played as good of an offense as this Louisville offense has. But I also think that they played much better defenses than this Louisville defense and have had their way. It really just kind of depends. Can Louisville force some turnovers? Can they get the Air Force offense in third and long situations? They have to execute on the keys to the game. I would like to see the offensive line and the defensive line really just win the trenches. That could be a big indicator on this one, trying to blow plays up in the backfield, forcing Hazik Daniels to throw the football. So overall, my final thoughts on this game is both teams, the SERVPRO First Responder Bowl, there's not too awful much to play for outside of, it being a postseason bowl game. You're playing for pride. You're playing for momentum heading into the next season. So I think that, equal is on the table for both squads. As far as I know, there aren't any, big injury or illness related losses for this matchup, or at least as I'm recording this early on Tuesday morning. So at the end of the day, I think for Louisville, it's going to be a matter of getting their offense on the field and sustaining drives while also keeping the Air Force offense in situations to where they have to convert third and long type scenarios. So ultimately, I think that this is a good test. I'm interested to see how disciplined the Louisville defense comes out. It's going to take the whole 11 guys on the field, from the defensive line to the linebacking core into the back seven and into the secondary. All of these guys are going to be forced to make some decisions, shred blocks, get into the backfield, force Air Force to make decisions and make mistakes. So ultimately, right now, I have Air Force winning. If I had to guess, it's by 3 points maybe. I think the spread was like 2 points the last time I saw it, 1.5 in Louisville's favor. But I'm going either way, and we will see how it goes. But tomorrow, Jeremy Wallman joins the show once again. We'll talk the football game and basketball review of the Wake Forest contest on Thursday. Tomorrow's episode, we're going to take back and look into 2021 and reflect about our favorite moments from the year and some bold predictions for the 2022 calendar year. So before we get out of here, a couple quick shout outs to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. You can check that out at cardinalsportszone.com. There was no episode due to the holiday weekend. There will be one coming up this weekend, so be sure to check that out. Also, the Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. You can get that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. But overall, that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. I appreciate you all for being patient as I've battled with a non-COVID related illness. I'm glad to be back. Thankful to have you back and watching or listening, whichever platform you're utilizing. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Keep liking, subscribing, rating, sharing the podcast. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you for being along for this ride as we take the next trek to episode 200, which will happen hopefully sometime mid-2022. That's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. Go Cards.